Hello, on behalf of the Hyderabad Literary Festival and Penguin India, it is my pleasure to invite all the viewers to this monthly online session of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you will be able to get updates about all our sessions. Every month we have one minimum, sometimes two sessions. Next sessions will be in June on 7th and 14th. Today's session is going to be interesting. What I will do is I'll take a couple of minutes to introduce the book and the speakers. Then I will ask the speakers to have the conversation. And towards the end of the session, I will come back with audience questions. Please use the YouTube live chat to write down your questions, which I will ask at the end of the session. Now, this is a wonderful conversation that is going to be happening between Nilanjana Bhowmick and Aparna Rayaprol. This is on Nilanjana Bhowmick's book, How Not to Be a Superwoman, a handbook for women to survive the patriarchy, which explores the immense pressure that most women face to excel in every role, mother, career women, partners, and friends, and the toll this pursuit takes on their mental health and happiness. The book unveils the raw, real stories of diverse women who have broken free from the relentless cycle of perfectionism and offers insightful, practical advice on achieving balance and joy that comes from embracing one's true self. Through a feminist lens, it confronts and rejects society's unrealistic expectations and advocates a life of fulfillment, self-compassion, and genuine empowerment. A must-read for women seeking to liberate themselves from the exhausting superwoman ideal and embrace a more self-loving, balanced way of living. And to do this, we have two superwomen who are going to speak about their experiences as well as the book. Nilanjana Bhowmick is an award-winning journalist and the author of two best-selling books on gender. Her first book, Lies Our Mothers Told Us, 2022, won the Laadli Award for gender sensitivity. She has also won multiple awards for her journalistic work on gender and development. Aparna Rayaprol, a friend of HLF, is a professor of sociology at the University of Hyderabad. Her areas of academic interest include gender studies, migration and diaspora, and urban sociology. She is the author of Negotiating Identities, Women in the Indian Diaspora. So we have a fantastic conversation coming up. I request you once again to please type your questions in the YouTube live chat, which I will ask at the end of the session. Over to you, Aparna and Nilanjana, for your conversation.
Thank you, Kinera. Thank you, Lasya. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, HLF, for having us here, for giving me the opportunity to read this very fascinating, interesting book about superwomen. Nilanjana, first of all, congratulations on this publication, and I wish you all the very best for the book itself.
Thank you so much, Aparna.
Yeah, it's absolutely, fascinating, the title itself. And I'm sure with our, WhatsApp and Instagram, there are many people who would think that you're trying to tell them to be a superwoman if they just glanced at the book, And I was so glad that you have so much to say about not being a superwoman. In the 1980s, I remember the opening line of paragraph of Arlie Hochschild's The Second Shift, when you have the woman with the flying hair and the briefcase and trying to keep everything in place and pulling her child into the car and dropping her off in school, having to be the perfect mom, the perfect, woman at home, the perfect spouse, partner, and at work, of course, perfect. So I think there was a phase of that perfectionism in the West, and there is that going on. What with, Women's Day and Mother's Day and all those messages about how great women are, this really came as a good antidote in that sense. And I wish a lot of people would take you seriously and think about what you just said as we were chatting, dropping the ball. Sometimes it really becomes very, very important. So I wanted to, say a few things. Being a sociologist, being someone who has been teaching sociology of gender for more than 2 decades, the classroom has been a space where one tries to bring about change, where one talks, raise a feminist consciousness, talking about difference, talking about people seeing each other differently. And when one, there is always that gap between what people read and think and what people actually do. So several conversations with students have been about, it's lovely to talk about this, but how does one really manage to do this? First of all, I think I want to ask you, what made you write this book? Um, what went into this whole process? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, Aparna, my first book, Lies Our Mothers Told Us, came out in 2022. And this was actually supposed to be the last chapter of the book. So because, that book is like kind of a, it examines Indian women's, like their whole life cycle, right from the time, you're born, and, the imposition, starts right when you are a child, right? So this was supposed to be the very last chapter, where I would sort of, like just like a manifesto, like that do's and don'ts, how not to be a superwoman. But like as I, worked on that book, got a very different life, as every book, does ultimately. And so that chapter got sort of abandoned. And so then, I was still very, it was still something, I wanted out there. Because, I felt like that it's very important to tell women, like we tell them, what's wrong. But it's also as important to share experiences, of how to put it right. Because I'll explain this a little bit more in a bit. But anyway, after Lies came out, I was just talking to a friend who worked in a publishing house, and he was like, and I was discussing this with him, and he said that this is a book, right? And I was like, I don't think this is a book. This was like a chapter. A chapter is like 5,000 words. The book is like 70,000, 80,000 words. Then he told me that, think about it. And, like, let's talk about it. And he planted that idea in my head. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. And by that time, of course, Lies had come out, and, readers were getting in touch with me. And mm, all of them said, okay, most of them, a majority of them said that, okay, great, you laid out all the problems, but what's the solution? Why don't you give any solutions in the book? Now, a book obviously has a limited amount of, numbers of pages. There's not, you can't do everything in one book. And then I felt like this would be a very logical way of, you know, um, putting out some solutions. Not institutional solutions, but personal solutions, things that we can do ourselves. So I think, like I started thinking about that. And once I started thinking about that, then of course, we all know what we go through in life. Where the superwoman syndrome starts, building in us, and what pushes us, towards being superwoman. So I think, like that was the, I would say that, readers' comments, I would say, was like, what, like, pushed me towards thinking of, how, see, for me, my first book, was always, it was never about just, telling people what's wrong. It was always about sharing experiences and learning from experiences. So when my readers were getting in touch with me and telling them of their experiences and their what they were expecting that, like next, or what more were they expecting, so that became a sort of a no-brainer for me that, like maybe I needed to do something more. And that was this book.
See, Nilanjana, I'm wondering whether, especially since I'm listening to you now, were you going in a direction of almost writing a self-help book, which came out of an experiential reality? That is one of the things that I was wondering. The second one was, this is a book which is clearly aimed at the educated middle class. And although you do have examples of people who are struggling as domestic workers and a couple of others, but I think it's primarily meant for the educated, almost Western educated urban middle class. So the self-help coming at, in the second decade of the 21st century, when there is a kind of taking for grantedness of the feminist struggles that went on with the previous generation. So there is a lot for these new young people to have, to take for granted, yes, but also they are going in a direction that makes them super confident. And because they are super confident, they are also probably super fragile. And that, I'm using the word super, for, taking off from your Superwoman. And they, don't want to say they don't want to be superwomen, but you're telling them it's okay not to be superwomen. Is that where you're going, in some ways? So are you looking towards self-help? Are you being the therapist in some ways, holding hands? What is your position in this?
Definitely, this is a self-help book. That's how I framed it. And it stems from a very basic, idea that if you read any self-help, that's out in the market, they don't really take into account women's differential experience. Women go through life very differently than men do, and it's there is no point in denying that. We look at life differently, we deal with life differently. So when I, read a self-help book, or if I'm reading, listening to a self-help podcast, I mm, the hustling, that you have to, do it, and you can do it. I feel like that is not what a woman's experience is. There is no, yes, we know our experience say that, we have to do it, because, it is non-negotiable that if not us, if not women, then who will do it? And I'm talking about, of course, like caregiving, and this expectation that you have to do everything right, right? So yes, definitely, this is supposed to be a self-help book. And I agree with you. We today's generation, girls, young women are way more confident than probably, I was at this age. But I don't think the basic premise of our life has actually changed. And that basic premise of our life is that we are still allowed liberties and freedom that is actually guaranteed by the Constitution, right? So we are always, like grateful that if one point of the equation had gone a little wrong, or one puzzle piece had, like fitted wrong, we probably, would have a different outcome in life, like, so I feel like while parents are also, encouraging their daughters a lot more than, like happened before, there is this sense that it is still a privilege that, women who, get to do, certain things in life, who get the freedom, who get the liberty, who get to study, who get to choose their life partners. It is still a privilege and entitlement that is not available to everyone. And this is not just a wealth thing. It is not just, it is a very cultural thing. It depends on what kind of family you are coming from.
It's a lot to do with socialization. What you're
Yes, of
taught,
course.
what community
Absolutely.
tells you, what people tell you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it's so much in the psyche or, as part of growing up, but I think we get it from everyone. That's
No, I
that's
mean,
what it is.
it is socialization. I mean, there are many, women who would come up to me and say that, you talk of caregiving as a burden. We don't feel it's a burden. It's women nurture better than men. It's a gift given to us. And I always ask them that, go back to your childhood when you'd be playing with your, brothers, and your mother, asked you to come to the kitchen. Did you go willingly? No, you were always, you didn't want to go. But then, you had to do that over a period of time. And then you thought and you were led to believe that this is a unique thing. This is something unique to you, that only you can provide care, that only you can nurture, only you can provide emotional sustenance. And these are all lies. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of reports out there which debunk all of these as myth. Men are as adept at providing care, providing emotional sustenance, nurture. They're as able to. It's just that part of their being is not and they are not encouraged to explore that part of their being. And why women are told that this is who you are, like, without, if you're not a caring person, then who are you? As a woman, you caring, care, the word care has to be in your it has to be your part of your being. You have to be
Is
caring, you
that
have to be nurturing, you have to be loving.
is that the reason why there's so much guilt? You have a whole chapter on guilt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
frankly, I was a bit uncomfortable with that chapter, to be very honest with you, because I felt the guilt was a bit overrated. A lot of people might agree with you. You may, not agree with what I'm saying, but is there really so much guilt among women when they are giving their careers attention? It's not about which is better than the other or where you want to put yourself or how you're trying to do the balance. The word balance is actually a very problematic word in that sense. But the real stories that you put in front of us, of course, show that there is a lot of guilt. But don't you think that we sometimes overplay that guilt as a society, as families, as parents raising children, as teachers? I don't know. There are different agencies that play into our learning. So I was wondering, can you tell us a little more about that guilt?
I don't think, I think, guilt is actually at the basis of the Superwoman syndrome. And and I know from my own experience that guilt has it's never stopped me from focusing on my career, but it has definitely forced me to work harder than, say, for example, my partner does. So I'm not sure I agree with you when you say that, it's overplayed or it's overrated. I feel that it is something that feeds into the Superwoman syndrome. It feeds into a lot of things because you are socialized as you know you are socialized in a way that you are made to believe that your reproductive responsibilities are more important than your productive responsibilities, so to say. That you are more required at home than you are required, like outside. And of course, women are stepping out to work, but they are stepping out to work with that is where the guilt comes from. When they're going out, they're going out with this idea that, and if somebody, like has been able to not feel that guilt, then you are a case study for how not to be a superwoman. Then I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you. So I mean, you would see that from the stories in the book. There are women who have gone through that entire cycle of guilt, and at a certain point of time they've realized that how futile it is. And that has been the same thing with me as well. It's been my experience as well. The harder I focused on my career, the more guilt I felt. Nobody made me feel the guilt. I mean, like, I'm very fortunate to have a partner who has, you know like, we have always been equals in our marriage. So nobody made me feel the guilt. My mother is like herself a superwoman. She has worked throughout her life. And my father, despite the fact that he was very traditional, was also very, like, when it came to his daughters,
Supportive.
he was a very open-minded person. And so nobody, actually made me feel guilty. It was just me. And, did it happen at home? No, it didn't even happen at home. I didn't grow up, in a household. Like, my mother would get really angry if she would come back from work and find that I was in the kitchen. And I would be in the kitchen trying to, um, get something done so that, when she comes home, like tired, at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, that she would get some rest. And she would get furious. She would be like, no, like, you don't go to the kitchen, like, do your studies. It's the same thing, when I got married, my mother-in-law was also, like the same. And she would always say, no, don't go to the kitchen, just go, do your thing. So
You also
there
have a
is,
very interesting legacy there. Your husband is a grandson of Mahashweta Devi, and
yeah.
that must have definitely been a very different family.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. They were like, I keep telling everybody that was a by walking, talking, initiation into, how to, live a life of equality without making a big deal about it, without putting tags of, there are so many tags and labels we use nowadays, right? And for the longest time, I wouldn't even, like, use the word feminist, because for me it was like something so embedded in me. Because I have never seen Bui, Mahashweta Devi, we called her Bui. um I have never, despite her huge body of, seminal works, I have never seen her, heard her use that word. But, she was such a feminist, in
of
every,
course, an icon.
yeah, and every part of her being. And even, like, same thing, with my husband, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. So, they were all, very people who instinctively believed in equality. So I cannot say that, like, I was in a situation where I was made to feel guilty for, focusing on my career. In fact, everybody pushed me, everybody rallied around me to help me, like, so that I could focus on my career. Even then, I felt so much guilt. So I think, it's something, kind of unavoidable, but it also depends on the kind of person you are. Some people are able to, I have friends, who have been able to, like, go through life without, that guilt. But
Absolutely.
I couldn't. So I think, it's a personal experience, and it's an individual experience. And when I was writing the book, like, obviously, somebody who has been able to do that doesn't need, like, the shared experiences of other women who were struggling and managed to do it. So that chapter is for those women, like myself, who were unable to figure that out, that guilt is also a patriarchal imposition, and that they can really drop the ball anytime, and nothing earth shattering will happen.
I was wondering, Nilanjana, do you want to talk a little bit about the people in your book? The real stories. Do you want, because you say them so well, I don't want to summarize that for you. But I'm sure our listeners, viewers would definitely, get a glimpse of some of the stories that you have there, and how did their lives change? I want to see that, them really coming out of that trauma, the trauma that people inherit. You said, it was very disturbing actually, to think about the fact that women are actually inheriting the trauma of their mothers or grandmothers, and without knowing how they go through their own experiences of abuse, violence, and what we are interested in more is how they face these experiences and come out scathed. Definitely, it's not a rosy, unscathed scenario, but how they come out, fight, and their life becomes something very, very different. You have such fantastic examples there. So I'd want to hear some of those from you.
In fact, Aparna, that just reminded me, I wanted to say this to your, I think, second question, but it also, aligns with this question. You said that, this book is essentially about educated, Western educated, middle class women. And with my first book too, I focused on middle class women. It's because I feel that, a lot of work, has happened in the grassroots. A lot of great work has happened in the grassroots in empowering women. If you just think about the self-help group, revolution, it's like completely revolutionized, women's lives in the rural areas. But I feel that, in all of this, the middle classes, which is a burgeoning class in India, right? Every year we are adding, like more and more people, to the middle classes. The middle classes, have remained quite immune because I feel like they're probably not very interesting, like not many studies have been done. In fact, in my first book, I, discussed this somewhat, that, the middle classes have actually escaped scrutiny. And it's probably because, women from the middle classes, they are Western educated, and you kind of feel that, they would have grown up with feminist ideals. But my own experience as a middle class woman has been that, middle class women are the most resistant to feminist ideals. Because their lives are such a balance, such a fine balance. The moment you topple a little bit of it, the status quo, you could just be losing, like your financial independence. And like it is so subtle among the middle classes. There's this facade of progressiveness, and I say this as a Bengali because Bengalis. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine, and I was telling her some stories from my professional life in Kolkata, and she was like, "What are you saying? You're breaking my heart. This is Kolkata. These are Bengalis." I'm saying, it happens. It's there is a facade, and but what happens behind closed doors is a very different thing, what we portray outside. And I think, with the middle classes, that has been a challenge. But I also do very firmly believe that unless and until we can get women from the middle classes, co-opt them into this feminist movement, I don't think we can actually have any sustained changes, what we're looking for in terms of equality. So, from that, of course, which is why I have focused on the middle classes, and with the women in my second book also, they're mostly middle class women. Some of them, I have come across during my reporting years, and I've stayed in touch with them. Some are my friends. Some, I have met on social media. So, when I started writing this book, I had posted on Twitter, just, so I just wanted to see, like what kind of a response, something like this would have. And I'd asked women to share their responses. And what really, like stood out to me was that so many of them came in my inbox and said that, this thread is so interesting because we thought we were the only ones who were facing this. And to me, that was so surreal almost, that we are all going through dealing with, struggling with the same experience, and yet we all feel like, we are in a silo, that, this is our own unique experience, that other people, other women have it better. So, and then of course, I interviewed, all of them, and my whole idea was to build a community to share lived experiences. Um, because I mean, you said, like, I think, like, earlier, that that if I'm being a therapist, I'm not a therapist, I need a therapist. I cannot function, I would not be able to function without my therapist. But yes, I wanted to bring women together on one platform, and a book for me, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer. For me, writing is how I invoke change. So for me, I was trying to build a community. I was trying to bring women from, different walks of life. Older women, younger women. I was actually very surprised, 20, women in their 20s that actually also responded, saying that. And I was very surprised because, they're like just starting their lives, right? I mean, they should not be feeling the burden of the Superwoman syndrome so soon, but they were there as well. So I brought them together. I brought, like, life coaches and therapists, like, all together. And I felt like mental health is such a taboo in this country, right? Women will women don't even think about going to a therapist, So I don't know, sometimes, when I, see the numbers, I read stories and I'm working on a story, I feel really desperate, and I don't know how can I help? Like, throughout my reporting career, that has been the one thought that has troubled me. How can I help? How am I helping? Am I helping anybody at all?
That's
And
what you try
this
to
was
do in your epilogue. You have in your epilogue actually
yeah,
steps for
yeah,
people to
yeah,
follow, I think.
exactly.
So
So
you
I
had to
think,
put it
like,
somewhere, and
yeah,
yeah, it's good.
I just wanted, like, to put my thoughts out there, because I have thought very deeply about this, like, I'm somebody, I mean, like, nothing, unusual, I mean, a lot of people are like big thinkers, but I'm like, I go into a trance sometimes, thinking of things. And I have thought about these things, and I wanted to put them down, where, somebody would pick up that book one day, and somebody somewhere would be helped by it, and that was what it wasn't. But, it ended up building a community also, because, every woman, who's commenting on the book on social media, somebody else is coming and then, like, saying, oh, we will read this. And it is building a community. And that is what I wanted to do, to build a community. So it's not so the women in my book are a starting point of this. They are the core members, you can say, of the No More a Superwoman Club. But, like, other women are joining, and they're joining, like, it's not like obviously a physical club, but, they are joining, because they are reading those experiences. Then they're, sharing, like, equating it with theirs, and that's what I wanted. So, all the women who are featured in this book, including myself, we have just started the conversation for others to pick up.
Well, I think I would have liked to see, more partnerships, more alliances with men, with other genders, with trans people whose sexualities are not necessarily heterosexual, because I think the alliance of not being a for those who don't want to be a super women, should be with everyone who has that consciousness that the burden is not only on, this kind of women. But I
No,
think,
there are, trans, I've interviewed trans women too for the book, because it was a very important, um, the important linkage for me was that, you are, some of us are born women, some of us choose to be women. And that, I wanted to bring in that experience of, choosing to be a woman and being born as a woman. So that experience is there. And but yes, men, and allyship, I didn't really touch upon it because mm, I feel like, allies are important. And of course, I mean, without, allyship, this movement is not going to go anywhere. But um, men have a lot of resources, this whole world belongs to them.
I think what I meant was sometimes there is what we called a revolution. We all focus for the last 50 years on our daughters and want to give them everything. But what are we doing to the sons? Like some
No,
of our
I think,
students
there's a
come,
revel. No, there's
some of our
a. I
students
think.
come and tell us, the partners are just not there, in mind, in the consciousness. Where are the, so we are not doing enough with our boys. And I feel that not being a superwoman is also placing an equal emphasis. And you say it sometimes in different ways, but it gets kind of, lost in the larger argument because that's not your primary argument. But I'm not saying you don't
Yeah.
say it, but I'm saying we need to also focus on how men need to realize that there are no superwomen around them. That realization for them is very important as well as
See,
part of the
I,
journey.
I think upon, the moment women stop being super women, it's a lesson in itself for men. Like, I have seen that in my home as well. Despite the fact that, my both my son and my partner, they are, they have grown up in a very different, like sort of a family. So, they have grown up with different ideals. But even then, there is a certain bit of taken for grantedness that comes in. But the moment I started, vocalizing that, I will not do this, because, I don't feel like doing this at this point of time. And they understood. So my son is 19 years old now. Um, I would say that, I have rarely come across, a 19-year-old who is so sensitive and to the other sex, or if there is an innate understanding in him, right? Like the moment he can understand, like, and it's not just with me, he's the same, with his friends, women friends, or other women, the acquaintances. So I feel that, when we stop being super women, that is something that will automatically happen. But I didn't want to focus on the men because I don't believe it's a woman's job to, like educate the men. We can do by our actions. I believe in actions. I believe that through our actions, we can, all of us, at a very individual level, up and, like I am thinking about homes, I'm thinking about families. I'm not thinking about a countrywide, revolution, because I don't think that is possible. I don't think we are ready for that. I am thinking very small. I'm thinking, let's start in our own families. Let's stop being super women, and let the men, like pick up some of the slack, pick up some of the, responsibilities, and they will learn. It's not rocket science, right? I mean,
Yes.
sharing responsibilities is not rocket science. So I feel that, that's why I didn't want to, dilute the focus by, like bringing in that. And also, that underlying belief that, if we change, I mean, things will change.
So, what is your favorite part of the book? I know it's not fair to ask an author to do that, but actually, what would you like us to take away from it?
It's very interesting, because I was, we had I was basically thinking about this. And I picked up the book, and I was thinking that, the mothers and daughters chapter is like I really like loved writing that. And I opened the book because I wanted to, like just go through it once, and it opened right at the mothers and daughters chapter. So I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. So yeah, that chapter is my favorite because I feel that a lot of mm, the secret to how not to be a superwoman lies in the stories that we never tell, or the stories that we never hear. And those stories, belong to our mothers, and those stories belong to their mothers. And I think, to unlock, this ability to not trying to be so perfect all the time, we'll start, by having conversations with our mothers, by examining their lives. And, I myself did that with my first book. I examined my mother's life so keenly. And I think what I came away with, was that I didn't want this to be my life, and I don't want to feel that kind of helplessness that she felt, throughout her life, despite the fact, she was a working woman, and like all of that. So I think, examining my mother's life, examining her thoughts, really helped me. Mm, it was something
Her
that my
too.
therapist had. Sorry.
I think your writing about her
Yes,
helped
yes.
her too. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was a very therapeutic process for both of us. And I remember my therapist, saying this to me, that, you should start talking to your mother. And when she said that, I was like, sometimes, talking to your mother is it's very fraught, because sometimes, you are tiptoeing around each other, because there are things, but do you really want to know them? Like, will you ever be able to unknow them once you know them? And then, when you know them, what do you do with them? So that is there. And it's the same thing with mothers also. Mothers also tiptoe around their daughters, once their daughters are married. How much do they want to know? Do they want to know it all? Because will they be able to help? What will they do if they know? So I think, it's very, very important, like for all of us to not tiptoe, around this, conversations, to have these conversations. And I think
Openness.
it helped me. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it helped me. Here, I'm actually, sharing my own personal experience. And I was helped by it. So I would definitely, like that is so, which is why, that chapter was like, as you said, an author cannot really have any favorites, but that chapter definitely, in this book, like I can pinpoint the chapter that is my favorite.
Yeah, I loved the parts about not wanting to throw parties. You know, because all the time it's as if the host is the one who's enjoying it the most, right?
Yeah,
And because then at the end of it all, there's not a hair out of place, and
yeah,
smiling all the time and showing off
absolutely.
everything, the culinary and the housekeeping and everything. So when the
Exhausting,
book,
exhausting.
yeah, yeah. So tell us a little
Yeah.
more about not wanting to throw those parties that you write so beautifully about.
So, I am like, and I think, most of us are like this. Like, we would throw like this one big, huge get together, end of the year. And I love cooking. It's something, I've always loved. And then, I would be like, and I don't even know why I was doing that. I would be just cooking up a frenzy, and then, whole evening, I would be like anxious and stressed out. Do they have enough to eat? Is the food going to go bad? They're not eating. Oh my God, is there enough, for everybody? When are they going to eat? And I'm not enjoying myself. I'm just, like I just have this smile plastered on my face. And by 7 o'clock, I am exhausted. I just want to throw off my shoes, and I just want to go off to bed. I do not want to speak to anybody. And uh, so till a couple of years back, I think, I completely stopped after COVID, during and after COVID, and even before COVID. And I would be like, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm like ready to go to bed, and I'm not enjoying myself. I'm tired, my like, and I started to actually completely tune out of conversation. So I would be just sitting there, with a smile plastered on my face, and I would be like smiling maniacally, and I was not hearing anything, I was not registering anything. And then, I would just go into the kitchen, pretending that, I was heating up something or something. But my mind just couldn't take it because, that build up to that whole get together was so much that on the day, I couldn't enjoy myself. I was like, all over the place. And even, like, so we started doing, potlucks, even that started becoming stressful because I am still the host, right? So I still have to make sure that everyone was well fed or, taken care of and all of that. So during, I think in COVID, for those 2 years, we really couldn't, have people over, right? And that felt so liberating, like and we usually would have like a get together at the end of the year. And 31st December, no pressure. Just go to bed at 9 o'clock, watch some TV. And I was like, oh my God, like, yeah, I was scared, we were all scared, with COVID. But, these were some of the realizations which also, was forced upon us at that point of time. That there were certain things, that you could live life, without, throwing great parties, and why was I even doing that? Because, I wanted people to think that, yes, I focused on my career, but I was also, like such a great, homemaker. I cooked, everything from scratch and, I kept a really nice home and people would come and then we would like, it's so, it so didn't matter, like in the longer, like vision of your life, it really doesn't matter. I didn't really need to be, and nobody expected me to be that superwoman. In like for me, it was like completely self-imposed obsession. With being able to be seen as somebody completely perfect, a perfect mother, a perfect wife, a perfect journalist, perfect writer. And I'm not the only one. All my friends are afflicted by this disease. They're all trying to be perfect all the times, and when they feel like they have let somebody down, it's really bad. And I'm sure you know that as well. I mean, like we have consoled each other so many times,
No,
like
absolutely. There's an
over
aunt
imagined letdowns.
whose birthday is January 1st. And when I called her and wished her, she said, "What did you do last night?" And I said, "No, nothing much. We have another friend's daughter's birthday today, and we'll all meet at the evening." She says, "How can you go through New Year's Eve without going to a
Yeah,
party? You know how we did it? You know how your mother and I used to do things." And it was interesting, when
yeah,
there's no
yeah.
pressure from around, but there is
Mm.
the whole extended circle that has
Yeah,
that expectation. And
yeah,
I think theirs was a generation that probably didn't realize that it was a burden at all. If they did, they didn't tell us
yeah.
because we didn't have those conversations.
I
Um,
know my mother resisted it. My mother would always be very uncooperative, when it came to get-togethers. And I remember growing up thinking, why can't she be a good sport, and do this? Because all around me, I would see my friends' mothers did all of that, but my mother was
I
very
see.
resistant.
Okay.
And, like, so I actually, like didn't,
You got
like
a
get this
sense
from
of
her
that.
at all. But I didn't get this from her at all. My mother was very resistant to being a superwoman, but she had no choice in that matter. I had a choice in that matter, but I chose to be a superwoman for I also I feel like, our generation also, has seen the social media boom, this mom influencers and all these influencers, like telling us, how to, all the smiley face sandwiches in children's lunch boxes and everything. It's a huge pressure, I mean, like, even if you do not want, it is still, like, because you are being bombarded from all sides, right? There are these women's magazines, they're always telling you to hustle and, like, be a perfect mother. How can you be a perfect mother? How can you be a perfect wife? How to be a perfect boss, lady boss. All of these things are being bombarded at us, from I don't think it's our families per se anymore. It's our surroundings as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, but I think I do see this book as, going along with many others. Like, for instance, seeing like a feminist, Nivedita Menon's, it's also, addressing younger people. So these are coexisting and, giving a lot of answers probably for people to get out of their guilt. But I think maybe Kinnara, you want to come in now and bring in some of the questions because yeah, it's probably time to do that. Although
Yes.
I would love to continue this conversation, but yes, let's
Nilanjana,
have the
would you
Nila.
like to say anything in conclusion before I pose the questions that have been asked in the chat?
No, let's go to the questions.
Okay, actually, they started with a whole lot of comments because I think quite a few superwomen are attending the session. And I think it resonated with a lot of people. So I'll take my prerogative as the presenter here to ask the first question, if you don't mind, that is. We started with the perfectionism. Why is it that women tend to be a lot more perfectionistic than men? And there's also a criticism that we miss the wood for the trees because we get lost in too many details and we want every single thing to be perfect. It is not just perfect in all the roles, but perfectionism as a trait. Would you think it's a disadvantage? It is something that we need to shed ourselves from it, or it's an advantage and it's something that we need to hone even better? Because losing details, and a lot of people just focus on the big things and leave out the details, but as women can't do that.
I feel like women are also just human beings, that like there are some men who are also perfectionists. There are some women who are born perfectionists, that is their trait, that is a character trait. But what is also a truth is that all women are expected to be perfect. And that perfection, like ranges from, at home, caregiving, work, how you look, how you dress, how you talk, how you hold yourself, how, all of that. I don't necessarily see perfectionism is an advantage, but then if it's a character trait. But when it's imposed on you, when you feel pressured by it, when it's forced on you, I don't think, anything that is imposed on anyone can be a good thing. So if you are not, if you don't think you are a perfectionist, but, you are being socialized by, your surroundings to be perfect in everything. So which means that you are putting in a lot more effort, not natural effort, acquired effort to be that perfect person. And that has a lot of, implications for your mental health, for your general quality of life. And I think, that forced perfectionism is not good and it should be rejected. But if it's a character trait, great, it's a great, character trait to have.
Okay. I have one more question, but I'll come back to it at the end if there is time. Anjali Lal Gupta asks a question. This is such a relevant issue to discuss. What do you have to say about the current work culture, especially among corporates, where being ambitious and super productive is celebrated?
Current work culture is completely toxic, and it is toxic because work, in terms as capitalism defines work as something productive, which is where we come up with this, this segregation happened, right? Women were expected to do the reproductive duties, which is staying at home, nurturing, giving birth, nurturing the mankind who went out to work, who did productive work. So that whole work culture has come up surrounding men's needs. Workplaces are not made for women. They're not gender responsive. They're not built for women. They are built to fail women. So which is why, when, there is this whole stress on being super productive, this hustle culture, it doesn't take into account women's differential needs, right? It's a man can actually stay behind at work till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever, or go for a drink with his buddies, Yes, women should be able to do that too. But Is that the reality in our country? No, we have to come back home. It's not only, about, having babies or having a family. It is also, is it also safe for women, like to stay back late, and there are so many considerations that women have. So this is our current work culture is completely toxic. And I feel like we really need to push for change at and we need to do it now because like women are actually suffering because of this toxic work culture because workplaces are not gender responsive.
Correct. Vijay has a question. How does not sharing a common language come in the way of intergenerational conversations and learning?
I would think quite a lot. I mean, you need to talk. Conversations do depend on understanding each other. But learning from different generations is not always about direct conversations. It's about sharing stories. Mm, so I think, sharing stories is important. It doesn't matter, if you're being able to, talk to your, say, for example, grandmother, like directly. You could be, like, there could be somebody, who would be able to, I'm sure, there would be somebody in the family who would be able to, like, tell you about her experiences. It is about learning about her experiences, or sometimes it is also about empathizing with, sometimes, you don't always need words, and that's what I believe, because as a journalist, I have traveled all across India. I have interviewed mostly women, and sometimes, I have not really share like I have not like I only speak Bengali, Hindi, and English. So I have interviewed, Punjabi women, I have interviewed women from the south, and I have not really understood their language, but I've understood their experiences even when they were talking about it, from their body language, from their, like, expressions. I have understood it. So I think, it requires empathy.
Okay. There's some comments made on in terms of therapy and writing as a therapy. I think these are two different things. One is that not everybody can use writing as a therapy, and taking therapy sessions is still seen as taboo. But I think you did make a mention of it. Would you like to comment on these two?
It's not just that going to a therapist is a taboo. It is definitely a taboo. Women and mental health is not, we are still not a society which is comfortable with mental health, even more so when it comes to women. We have to remember that mental health is actually a ground for divorce in India. So then, if women are not comfortable about going to a therapist because they'll be branded crazy. That's what it is at a very simple level. You'll be branded crazy. So that's one. But also, therapy is not cheap. Therapy is expensive. So we have not made it accessible to people. So that is also there. That is also something, and we do not have enough, psychiatrists in this country. I think it's like what, 1/3 to every like 1,000 people or 10,000 people. I'm not like, I can't remember the figure correctly right now, but we do not have enough therapists in this country. The therapists we have are expensive, and a lot of them are also not very inclusive. They are patriarchal. The way they deal with women is also it's a reflection of our society, because this is the society we grow up in, right? This is when you go home, you see certain things, you grow up with those embedded ideas, those socializations. So therapy, we really have to look at that. We have to make it more accessible. We have to ensure that the courses, like psychologists and psychiatrists, there needs to be there needs to be a gender lens in those courses, like how to deal with women's like specific problem. Women also have a lot of trouble opening up because there's so much shame around talking about your personal life. So that all of that requires a very focused kind of interventions.
Very true. You did talk about guilt. One thing about, it just occurred to me when you're talking about the cost of therapy. Most women try to put themselves at the bottom of the scale when it comes to spending on themselves. How do you get over this guilt? How do we advise younger women to get over this guilt?
This is again, socialization, and the more you talk about it, I remember, many years back, I was doing a story on breast cancer, and all the doctors told me that, the reason there is so much, fatalities with, cervical cancer and breast cancer among women is because women will not go to the doctor until the last moment. Like, they will put up with the pain, they will not complain, they will, just, not say anything. But when they can't anymore, then they will go to the doctors, and by that time it is already too late. And it is the same thing with therapy as well. And I think we need more conversations. We need more conversations like this. We need more books. We need more women coming out and sharing their experiences, because um, I feel like where we are right now, um, we really need to have mm, very very focused kind of intervention. Like, I mentioned this in my book, I think, that, let's start by having support groups in every neighborhood, where women, give women a safe space to come and talk about their experiences. No other expectations. No expectations of them becoming part of a movement, going out and, like, on the streets protest. Nothing. Just give them a safe space where they can come and, like, sit with other women and share their experiences. I think, like, we should start really small. The problem with us is that we always start big, and that doesn't work because, there is such a huge barrier of socio-cultural norms that we have to, struggle with.
One final question, and this from me. Most of us who realize that we have been superwomen have actually been the daughters of or have come from families which actually believe in feminism, and our mothers themselves have been fighters in the forefront. They were the first generation fighters, or maybe second generation, but we had that comfort, and yet we struggled with this guilt feeling and with this perfectionism, wanting to be everything. How do we advise those people who are coming out for the first time? Because if it was so difficult for us, how much more difficult it is for them to balance life, work-life balance?
I think there is a really, the simple, solution to this, or the simple answer to this question would be, the more, women are out there, the easier it becomes. Like, I know what you're talking about. We come, like, from families, like my mother, like, was, like, a complete feminist. She is a complete feminist. Um, but, they were also a handful of women, right, in their generation. We also are kind of a handful of women in our generation. But I see the next generation, and I see that, more young girls are aware of the pitfalls of, being, like, this balancing, life and, like, work. They're much more aware, because, obviously, schools have sort of, started, like, some, form of, education in this regard. But also, the world has opened up. I was just talking about this the other day, with somebody, that, that kids are watching Netflix all the time. They're seeing, that whole Western culture, like, no matter, like, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's not like Western societies are completely equal, but there is a semblance of equality. At least, if you switch on a Netflix show, you will see a man cooking, or a man doing laundry, or a man being called out, like, for being sexist or whatever. I mean, I'm not painting Western societies as ideal, but I'm just saying that they are ahead of us in that, because they had started calling out the Superwoman syndrome right in the 70s. We are like in the initial stages. I don't think even 3 to 4 years back, before, when I was writing my first book, Lies, I couldn't find any mention of Superwoman syndrome anywhere. So my entire research was focused on global studies, and like I analyzed those studies against the whatever data I could find from India. So I feel that like all of these are working together, and the next generation, I feel, are better placed. And the more we talk about it, the more we write about it, the more we come together to discuss it, the better it will become. I'm a
Yeah,
very
even
hopeful kind of person.
yeah. Can I jump in here,
Yeah, yeah,
Kinnara,
yes,
for a
Aparna.
minute? No, because I think to continue this with your question and to take it back to the language question raised by Vijay a little earlier, I think what is happening also is that you're dealing with a number of young women who are, and men who are the first generation smartphone users. And their parents, their mothers, have no clue as to what they are browsing and the kinds of things that Nilanjana is giving us examples about. Young women from different backgrounds are able to access, a show which is being talked about in the classroom and the first generation learner. So when she goes back, the gap between the mother and the daughter is huge, much more than what people like us have faced, definitely. And that's where the challenge comes, about decisions about careers, decisions about marriage, and the struggles that they face. So I think that language probably is not there. And then, there was the journalist Ammu Joseph once talked about the Me Too movement as saying those of us who were in offices and media houses in the 70s did not have the language of complaint that
Yeah,
young journalists today have.
correct.
They just didn't have that language. They knew they were
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So they would go into the room of an editor or somebody else or a senior, 4 or 5 of them together. So things have changed. Things are much better now. There is the culture of complaint at the workplace has increased, but the gap definitely is more for those who are first generation. I think that's just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on, actually, because there is hope that because of the information explosion and exposure, the next generations of women are better suited and better capable of handling work-life balance much better than us, and with lesser guilt, I suppose. So thank you, Nilanjana, for a wonderful insight into your book. And I hope that certainly a lot of people will buy it and read it and buy it and read it. And thanks, Aparna, for steering the conversation so well. Thank you very much, Penguin India, and to Hyderabad Literary Festival. Please tune in again next month. We have 2 sessions coming up. We want you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be updated when they are announced. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Happy writing, Nilanjana.
Thank you, Aparna. It was a pleasure talking to the two of you.
Thank you, Kinnara.